Most people think rest stops are safe just because they're public. Lights on, bathrooms open, a place you pull into when you're too tired to think clearly. That's what I thought too. Until the night I pulled off the highway during a winter storm and realized that public doesn't mean protected. Sometimes it just means there are no witnesses. My name's Evan, and this happened last winter while I was driving home from a contract job outside Duluth. I wasn't supposed to be on the road that late. The forecast had said light snow, nothing serious. But by midnight, the storm had thickened into something heavy and suffocating. Snow wasn't falling so much as floating sideways, sticking to everything it touched, and my headlights felt useless beyond 20 feet. The sky hung low, like the clouds were pressing down on the highway itself, and every mile demanded more focus than the last. I'd already passed 2 semi-trucks pulled onto the shoulder, with their hazards blinking through the white haze when my GPS announced a rest area ahead. I didn't argue with it. I took the exit automatically, grateful for any excuse to stop moving. The rest stop was lit, but barely. Tall sodium lights cast sickly yellow pools onto snow-covered pavement, and everything outside those circles dissolved into darkness. No cars, no trucks, no movement at all. I parked facing the building and left the engine running, the sound of it idling the only thing reminding me I wasn't completely alone. That should have been my first warning, because rest areas are never empty, not even during storms. I sent a quick text to my sister just to ground myself, telling her I'd pulled over because the weather was bad. She didn't respond. It was after 1 a.m, and that didn't bother me at the time. I sat there longer than I meant to, watching snow slide sideways across the windshield and listening to the uneven ticking of my engine cooling. The silence felt padded, like the entire world had been wrapped in insulation. Eventually, I needed the bathroom. That's how you get people out of their cars. Basic necessity, routine, the false comfort of normal behavior. Inside, the building smelled like disinfectant and wet concrete. The lights flickered, not enough to fail, just enough to notice, and the men's room was empty. When I washed my hands, the mirror reflected someone who looked more tired than scared, which bothered me later more than it should have. On my way out, I noticed a maintenance door at the far end of the hall that wasn't fully shut. Not open, just not seated properly, like it had been eased closed without being latched. The gap was thin, but intentional looking. I told myself it was nothing. Buildings shift in storms. Pressure does strange things, and I pushed it closed until it clicked. When I stepped back outside, that's when I saw the footprints. They came from the tree line, deep and clean, cutting straight across untouched snow toward the side of the building. No wandering, no hesitation, just a line. And there were no footprints going back. I stood there longer than I should have, staring at them like they might rearrange themselves into something less unsettling. That's when I heard the voice behind me. Just one word. Hey. It was close enough that I felt it before I fully heard it, and when I turned, there was a man standing just beyond the edge of the light, right where the yellow glow bled into shadow. Wearing a heavy winter jacket, face angled away, hands tucked into his jacket pockets. Completely still. Too still. He spoke calmly, friendly even, commenting on how bad the roads were and asking if I was okay. People who are genuinely checking on you don't stay in the dark, and that thought hit me immediately. I told him I was fine and heading out, but he didn't move. He adjusted his position, just enough to stay between me and my driver's side door, not blocking it outright, just subtly influencing the path. He asked how long I planned to stay, and nodded when I said I was leaving, telling me that was smart. He talked about how storms like this make people comfortable, how they try to sleep it out and end up making mistakes. The word everyone stuck with me when he said it, like he'd seen this situation play out before. I asked where he'd come from, and he smiled faintly beneath the hood, answering, "Same place everyone does." When I pulled out my phone and said I was calling State Patrol, The friendliness vanished instantly. Not anger, just removal. He stepped closer, measured, controlled, telling me there was no need for that, and that he just wanted to make sure I wasn't stranded. As I unlocked my car, I noticed another set of footprints near the dumpsters behind the building. Smaller, partial, like someone had been standing there for a while, watching. I got into the car and locked the doors immediately. He tapped on the window once with his knuckle, polite and deliberate, telling me I'd dropped something. I didn't look. When I said I didn't think so, the tapping grew firmer, and he leaned closer, telling me I didn't want to forget something important. When I started the engine, it hesitated for half a second, and my stomach dropped. He leaned in closer and said quietly that this was usually where people panic. Then the engine caught. I put the car in drive and pulled away, his hand sliding flat against the glass as I passed him, not slapping or pounding, just resting there like a reminder. In the mirror, I watched him step back into the darkness, as if he'd never been there at all. I didn't stop until I reached a stretch of highway with actual traffic, real movement, real noise. When I finally checked my phone, there was a text from an unknown number telling me I had forgotten to turn my headlights back on. They were already on. I never stopped at rest areas after that. Not alone, not at night, not during storms, because some places don't need locks. They just need patience. Security cameras don't stop anything. They don't scare people away, and they don't protect you the way we like to believe they do. All they really do is record if they're pointed in the right direction, and let you watch something unfold in real time while you sit there realizing you're too far away to intervene. I learned that during one overnight shift when I was the only security operator inside a regional transit depot during a winter shutdown, and I realized the cameras weren't just being watched by me. My name's Lucas, and at the time I worked nights for a bus and rail hub in northern Minnesota, the kind of job built almost entirely on routine. Long hours, empty terminals, and the understanding that nothing ever happens until it does. That night, the storm had come in heavier than forecast. Every outbound route was canceled. No arrivals, no departures, just locked doors and echoing halls, while snow hammered the building from every side. The control room sat on the second floor, enclosed in thick glass, lined with old analog cameras that had been retrofitted into a digital system that barely worked. Snow interference made half the feeds bloom white whenever headlights passed outside, and most of my job was just scanning screens, logging nothing, and drinking bad coffee until sunrise. At 12:30 a.m., I did my routine sweep. Platforms locked, emergency exits sealed, maintenance corridors clear. Everything looked normal, which is exactly why I almost ignored what happened next. At 1:07 a.m., camera 14 flickered. Not static, not snow, movement. Just a shape crossing the far end of the platform, slow and deliberate, hugging the edge of the frame where the coverage thinned. I rewound the feed and watched it again. The figure didn't rush. It didn't wander. It moved like it knew exactly how much space it had before the camera would lose it. When I checked the adjacent cameras, there was nothing. No alarms triggered, no doors opened. By the time I switched back, the platform was empty again. I logged it as weather interference, told myself it was compression noise or drifting snow, and took a sip of coffee that had gone cold without me noticing. 25 minutes later, a maintenance hallway sensor tripped. That pulled me out of autopilot. Those sensors aren't motion-based. They're pressure-sensitive. Weight sets them off. I pulled up the feed, and the hallway appeared empty, lit only by low emergency strips that cast everything in a pale green glow. At the far end, though, the exterior service door wasn't fully closed. Not open, just unlatched by an inch. No card swipes. No overrides. It hadn't been opened electronically. Someone had used their hands. I radioed Storm Patrol, already knowing the answer. They confirmed I was alone on site. That was when the cameras started changing. Not all at once, and not dramatically, just enough that I noticed. Camera 6 tilted slightly downward. Camera 9 lost part of its upper frame. Camera 14 again showed movement. Closer this time, more confident. Someone wasn't avoiding the cameras anymore. They were adjusting to them. I checked the monitor rack and system logs, expecting to see a reboot or power fluctuation, but there was nothing. The shifts were manual. Someone was physically touching the housings. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped into the stairwell, immediately aware of how different the building felt when you left the control room. Snow outside muted everything, and inside, sound didn't behave the way it should. My footsteps didn't echo properly. Halfway down, I heard a soft click. A metal-on-metal sound somewhere below me. I froze, called out that it was security, and listened to my voice disappear into the concrete. No response. I went back upstairs instead of pushing deeper, and that decision still feels like the only reason I'm telling this story. When I sat back down, I saw him on the main terminal feed. A person standing beneath the departure board, positioned perfectly where the cameras overlapped least. The hooded jacket that they were wearing covered their face. Face turned away. Hands visible and empty. He didn't move. He didn't look around. He just waited. I picked up the radio and reported a trespasser inside the terminal, and the response came slower than I liked. Units were delayed. Roads were bad. Could I maintain visual? Before I could answer, the figure looked up straight at the camera and smiled, not wide or exaggerated, just practiced. Then he raised his hand and pointed directly at the lens. The feed cut to static. All of them. The emergency lights kicked on across the terminal, not a blackout, but a controlled shift to backup power. Someone had thrown the transfer. The control room door handle rattled once, then again, and a calm voice came through the glass telling me I could unlock it, that they just wanted to talk. I didn't answer. When they spoke again, they mentioned details they shouldn't have known where I sat, which camera I favored, how long I'd been watching. I keyed the radio loudly, announcing I was calling police and describing the situation as if help were already on the way. That's when the footsteps retreated, fast and confident, disappearing back into the building. Police arrived near dawn and found nothing. No intruder. No forced entry. But in the maintenance hallway, they found fresh tool marks on several camera mounts measured, precise like someone practicing. I quit 2 weeks later, and now, whenever I see a security camera, I don't wonder what it's watching. I wonder who's already learned exactly where it can't see. Hospitals don't really sleep. Even in the middle of the night, something is always moving, machines cycling, lights humming, footsteps echoing somewhere you can't quite place. That's why the silence stood out immediately. Not quiet the way hospitals usually are at night, but hollow, like the building had stopped breathing. When the call light chimed from a room that wasn't supposed to exist anymore, I knew I'd already missed the first warning. My name's Nina, and in 2021 I was working nights as a float nurse at a regional hospital in western Colorado. The kind of place that looks calm on the surface, but feels stretched thin if you spend enough time there after dark. Float nurses don't get attached to floors. You just go where you're needed. Sometimes to wings that feel half abandoned, even during the day. That night, I was assigned to East Wing, 3rd floor. It had been partially decommissioned, no new admissions, no new patients, just 3 long-term cases clustered near the nurses' station. The rest of the hallway sat dark, lights off to save power, rooms stripped of equipment and beds, doors either propped open or marked closed. At least, that's what I was told. Outside, the storm had been pounding the building since before sunset. Heavy snow and wind rattling windows hard enough to make you flinch, even when you were used to it. By a little after 2 in the morning, I finished rounds, checked vitals, and poured myself a cup of coffee, letting my brain slip into that numb, half-alert state night shift gives you. That's when the call light chimed. Soft, polite, room 317. I frowned immediately, because room 317 wasn't occupied. It hadn't been for weeks. I checked the board to be sure. 317. Closed. Sometimes systems glitch old wiring, outdated software. Hospitals are full of those kinds of ghosts. So I reset the call light and watched it go dark. 30 seconds later, it came back on. Same room. Same calm chime. I called security, half joking, asking them to confirm that East Wing was still empty past room 314. The guard sounded tired, told me it was the same as always, and laughed it off as a wiring issue. That answer didn't sit right. Wiring doesn't assign room numbers. I grabbed my flashlight anyway and walked down the hallway. Past the last occupied room, the lighting dropped to emergency levels, pale blue strips along the floor, everything else swallowed by shadow. My shoes sounded too loud, like the hallway was listening. Room numbers ticked past until there was nothing but darkness. And then there it was. Room 317. The door was closed. That stopped me cold. Housekeeping always props unused rooms open, so staff can see inside at a glance. Always. I knocked once and announced myself. No response. When I cracked the door open, the room was empty. No bed, no monitors, no equipment, just bare walls, stripped fixtures, and a single chair shoved into the corner. And on the linoleum floor, leading from the bathroom to the call button, were bare footprints, fresh, clear, human. I stepped back so fast my shoulder hit the wall, my heart dropping instead of racing, like it understood something before I did. I closed the door, walked back to the nurse's station without running, and picked up the phone to call security again. This time telling them someone had been inside 317. When they arrived with a second guard, we walked back together. The door to the room was open now. The footprints were gone. The chair had been moved to the center of the room, positioned to face the door. One of the guards swore under his breath. They searched the room, the bathroom, the adjacent storage areas, and found nothing. No person. No explanation. They chalked it up to trespassing, maybe someone sheltering from the storm. That explanation fell apart when I asked how someone could walk barefoot through the hospital without leaving a single footprint anywhere else. No one answered. I tried to finish my shift, telling myself not to spiral, but around 4 in the morning, one of my actual patients rang. When I stepped into his room, he was wide awake, pale, staring past me toward the hallway. He asked if I'd seen him too. When I asked who he meant, he swallowed and told me there was a man who stood in the hallway at night, watching doors, pressing buttons, just standing there waiting. I didn't ask him to explain. I didn't need him to. I transferred off East Wing the next week. 2 months later, the hospital permanently sealed that section during a renovation inspection. When they tore into the walls, they found handprints between the studs, pressed into dust like someone had been standing there when the walls went up. I don't work nights anymore, and I don't ignore call lights unless they come from rooms that were never supposed to answer back.